Okay, here we are. So please put your hand together for Abubakar and this presentation about radio from Hugging Face.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience as we got that set up. So I'm Abubakar. I am a machine learning team lead at Hugging Face. Previously, just by quick way of introduction, I did my PhD at Stanford in applied machine learning. And during my PhD, I started this open source library and company called Créer. And last year, we got acquired by Hugging Face, French company. And so now I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about why we started Créer, what we built, and how you might find it useful for the machine learning work that you do. Before I get started, how many people here have heard of or tried using Stable Diffusion? Okay, awesome. A good number of people here. Or DALL-E Mini, perhaps. Maybe you guys tried that out as well. Okay, awesome, great. Well, if you guys tried it out, so by the way, for those of you who have not tried it, these are image generation models, right? So you put in your any sort of text prompt, and the machine learning algorithm will generate a few images that are inspired by what you have entered. And the cool thing about these images is that they don't already exist. It's not scraping from some sort of database, but it's actually generating the images from scratch. But the point that I want to actually talk about is not so much the algorithm, but if you tried it out, how did you actually try it out? Most likely, many of the folks here tried out a web demo. Is that right? Probably you guys tried out the web demo. Many of those web demos were hosted on Hugging Face, but maybe in other places as well. Almost certainly, that web demo was actually built with Créer. And so if this looks familiar or this looks familiar, the UI part of this piece, the GUI piece, was actually built with Créer. And this is actually really interesting because we looked at the statistics for how many people tried out something like DALL-E Mini, and it was astounding. At its peak, DALL-E Mini was generating 50 million images per day. Right? 50 million images per day were being generated by all sorts of people, all sorts of users that were trying out their own images, kind of trying out their own prompts, seeing the images that were produced. The reason I bring that up is because we are at a turning point in the usage of machine learning. It used to be that if you were using machine learning models, particularly state-of-the-art machine learning models, you were almost certainly a machine learning engineer or a hacker in some sort of way. In the last decade, it's changed a lot. Thanks to open source libraries like Hugging Face's transformers and other things, software engineers could access state-of-the-art machine learning models almost as APIs. But in the last couple of years, it's changed even more dramatically. You don't even need to be an engineer, right? You don't even need to be an engineer. You don't need to be any sort of kind of technical person in order to try out a state-of-the-art machine learning model. What we're seeing increasingly is when machine learning models are released, not only do authors release the code and the paper, but they also release a GUI or some sort of web demo that makes their machine learning model accessible. And this is a great thing, I think, for the field of machine learning because it helps make it more reproducible, but also for ordinary people like me who just love trying to see, what state-of-the-art machine learning, what people are building, what are the cool things that people are building. So what I want to talk a little bit about is increasingly a lot of those demos are actually built with Créer. And why is that the case? Traditionally, it was quite difficult to build a machine learning demo. If you wanted to build a web demo for your machine learning model or even your kind of just whatever program that you had built, you needed to first train a machine learning model using one of those frameworks like TensorFlow or PyTorch, which was great. But then you needed to know a whole set of other technologies for containerizing, deploying your model. Maybe you want to store data. How are people trying out my model? I want to store that data. So I need to know a little bit about databases, SQL. And then, of course, I need to build a UI because other people I want non-technical people to try it out, and so I need to know a little bit of web scripting. This is, I think, a lot to ask for many machine learning people, and it's not just different frameworks, but they're also in completely different languages. And so the reason we built Créer, kind of the TLDR here, the kind of summary of it, is that we wanted to make this entire stack possible entirely in Python. And so Créer will let you deploy your machine learning model, store incoming data, and build an interactive front end entirely in Python. And the cool thing is almost minimal Python. It's almost just like a handful of Python lines. And people have adapted it for all sorts of demos. I'm going to probably go through this relatively quickly. But it's not just images, it's not just text, it's even things like audio. You have this demo that was built by Microsoft in order to make it easier, to make it possible for you to try out their authentication, their voice authentication model, and many, many other models. And the cool thing is it's very, very simple to use. You can build your first demo in just 3 lines of code here. I just have a quick question for you. How much time do I have? I'm gonna. Oh, okay, great, perfect. Okay, great. So I'll actually then get to kind of share a little bit more about how this works. But the cool thing is that you can actually try out Gradio with just a handful of lines. And typically the way that it works is, let's say you want to build a drag and drop like image interface, something that people can drop their images and get a prediction. It takes literally 3 lines of code to build the GUI piece and to share it with other people. So we'll take a look at that shortly. The other thing that is very exciting, and we're seeing a lot of interest in this, is the ability to host your demo. So once you have your demo, you want to host it. You want to make it accessible to other people. You want to have a permanent link that you can embed on your own personal website or your blog or your portfolio. You can do that for free using something called Hugging Face Spaces, which I'll talk about. We're seeing pretty amazing traction. So these are the latest kind of numbers of usage of Gradio. Last month, about 150,000 people built Gradio demos. So these are not people who are using them, but actually using the open source library and building their own demos. So by the end of this quick demo, this quick talk, you guys can be actually creators yourself. So for those of you guys who might have your laptops open, you're free to kind of follow along with this. This link here, tinyurl.com/BDE6WP7Z, this is a Colab notebook. So for those of you guys who don't have your laptops, maybe take a picture of this and you can try this afterwards at your own time. But for those of you guys who do have your laptops, I'm going to just quickly show up and give you guys a practical, let's see if this works. Yeah, awesome. Things opening up. So I'm actually going to give you guys a practical introduction to Gradio, so you guys can actually see what the code looks like and maybe use it for your own kind of application in the future. So awesome. So let's jump straight into it. So what is Gradio for? It's for building machine learning, all kinds of machine learning demos, anything from image classification models to speech recognition to question answering. You can do pretty much anything. So all right. So at the end of the day, let's go ahead and connect here. Can someone translate this for me? Which one is the correct one? Okay. And then. Oh, okay. Awesome, perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Yeah, it's a little bit different. So yeah. It's okay. Let's see. You hit the Wi-Fi password here again? No. Oh, and she left. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Okay, that's fine. I think what we'll do is we'll just go through the code. We don't have to run it ourselves. Okay. Yeah. So we can yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I think what we'll just do is we'll go through the code, and that way you'll at least have an idea of what the code looks like. And for those of you guys who have your laptop or in the future, you can run this and actually see the demos that are produced. It's pretty cool because the demos will show up right in the Colab notebook or the Jupyter notebook or wherever you run it. But that's fine. Okay, so all right. So basically, let's to get started. The Gradio takes in 3 ingredients. Okay, so this is very important. So Gradio takes in 3 ingredients. The first is your function. Okay, so this can be any sort of Python function. It's usually the prediction function of a machine learning model, but it doesn't have to be, right? So in this case here, for example, I have a function just called greet, and it just takes in your name, and then bonjour followed by your name, and just returns it. So very, very, very straightforward. You know, this is as simple as it can be. This is like the hello world of Gradio. Then what you do is you take in this function that you have defined, and you pass that along with 2 other parameters that I'll mention into the Gradio.interface class. So the interface class is what creates the UI, the user interface. It's the core class of Gradio. All right. So you take in your function, and then you take in and then you pass in what is the appropriate input UI for this function, and what is the appropriate output UI. Right. So in this case, this is a text-based model or a text-based function. So the appropriate UIs are a text box, an input text box, and an output text box. And so if you were to go ahead and run this, what you would see is you would see a little UI that's created right here that would allow you to interact with your function, right? The UI is just a wrapper around the function. So I'm going to go forward and just give maybe a couple more examples. So this example here is this is an image-based example. So what this does is it takes in an image as a NumPy array, right? So it takes an image as a NumPy array, and it simply takes that image and multiplies it by a filter, by a matrix, all right? And then it returns that adjusted image. Now here, for something like this, again, you can wrap it with a Gradio UI very, very easily. But in this case, the input is an image, and the output is also an image. And if you were to run this code, what you would find is that a UI is created that would allow you to drag and drop your images, just kind of from your desktop or wherever wherever you want, and it would run it through your function, and you would see the output. The cool thing is that Gradio takes care of the pre-processing and post-processing, right? You don't have to worry about converting your image into that NumPy format from that browser-based format or vice versa. Gradio takes care of that and shows you the output. I'll just show maybe one more example, just to show kind of more complexity that can be added to your UI. So one of the things when people create UIs, they want to often add things like titles, descriptions, examples. And so you can have much more complex functions. And so this is an example with Gradio where we're creating like a little calculator. And in this case, you can see that your function takes in multiple parameters. And that's fine. If your function takes in multiple parameters, you can actually pass in a list of UI components. So that's what we do here. And we actually just pass in a list of UI components, and that list of components gets passed as each of those UI components correspond to one of your parameters, right? So Gradio.number corresponds to num1, Gradio.radio corresponds to your operation, and then the third number corresponds to the third parameter. And then again, outputs here is a single thing because you only return one thing from your calculator. And then you can pass in examples that are preloaded. Again, if this was working, I can kind of show you how that looks in the UI. But that allows anyone to quickly try out your machine learning model without having to think too much about having to find or think of a particular example input. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to go back and I'll just mention I think one important thing, which is Hugging Face spaces. So let's see here. Just going to go here. So Spaces is a way to actually host your machine learning demos. Again, completely for free. Think of it as kind of like the GitHub of machine learning demos. And one of the cool things is when you go on Spaces, you can see a lot of other things that people are building. And so, for example, you can see something like this. Prompt extend is something that is used to kind of help you come up with prompts for things like stable diffusion. So this is an example Gradio demo, but many other things as well. So this is a very different type of machine learning demo that's designed to help you find biases in stable diffusion and many of these types of models. And so So anyway, so this is something that can be tried, and you can kind of explore Hugging Face spaces. So Hugging Face spaces is cool because you can see other people's demos, you can get inspiration from that, or you can use that to host your own demos as well. So I'm probably just going to pause here and let you guys try out Gradio yourself. If you want to try it out, you can go on www.gradio.dev. That's the GitHub repo for Gradio. You can try pip installing Gradio and writing your first Gradio app wherever you write Python. So it works inside Jupyter Notebook. It works inside, wherever. And then if you have questions, you can kind of find us in different places or find me on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening to this. And I'm happy to maybe take a couple of minutes and just answer any questions that you guys might have. Yes?
Why does your demo not work?
I know, right? Live demos. So my the Colab, I wasn't unfortunately able to run the Colab notebook, but you can see a lot of actual demos right here. So I'll just maybe show. I'll just kind of, again, I kind of showed that, but maybe a few more kind of interesting things you can try out here. So this is also a Gradio demo that was built by Lambda Labs. And so you can actually try this out here. For example, this is a text-to-image model here that is designed specifically in the Naruto flavor. And so actually one of the interesting things that I think I should mention is that Gradio comes in like packed with a lot of really cool, helpful features for you. So for example, it has a built-in queuing system. So if a lot of people are trying out your demo, not only are their requests added to a queue, but they can see exactly where they're in the queue and things like that, which can help. Now this is a very, very popular model, so it has a long queue, but you can kind of try things out, try other things out as well. So yeah, so I don't know what this one is, but you can kind of, oh yeah, okay, this is actually pretty cool. This is a correspondence matching model. You take two different images, but this kind of gives you the flavor of what's possible with Gradio. Any other questions, if we have time?
We have time. One more question. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So imagine that I train my model on my Jupyter Notebook. I assume then to use it with Gradio and to open it up to the public, I need to put it somewhere that has like an API so Gradio can contact it, I'm guessing. Is there a future where I can just like do some Gradio command and that's taken care of?
Yeah. So actually, no. So you can do it completely locally, right? So all you do is you define a function, and then you write Python code to take in that function, and that UI is created locally. So you have a local web server that's running and rendering that. And sorry, I should have clarified that. So by default, Gradio runs locally. So your code doesn't go anywhere, your function doesn't go anywhere. Hugging Face Spaces is a way to host that same code. So you take the same code, the same model, whatever it may be, and you put it somewhere so that other people can access it. So it's like persistent hosting for free, but you certainly don't have to use it that way if you'd rather keep it local.
And then in case I use it, I'll be sending my model parameters to the Hugging Face Spaces.
Yes, so typically the way it works is people will upload their model as part of, it's like a repo. Think of it as like a Git repo. You can kind of just host whatever files you want there. Yeah, awesome.
Yes, can we deploy an app everywhere on Kubernetes in the cloud? Is it possible?
Yes, definitely. So we have some guides if you want to deploy it in different places. We have people who host it locally. You certainly don't have to use Hugging Face Spaces. So Gradio at the end of this is an open source Python package, so you can deploy it wherever you want. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Abubakar.
Thank you so much, everyone.